If there's one thing everybody knows about Bethesda, it's jank. Their games, while pretty great, do have a healthy amount of bugs and a whole lot of crust, but there's something just enchanting about the worlds they're able to craft. I've been a fan of Bethesda since I first played Oblivion as a wee lad, and to say their games have had an impact on me would be an understatement. Fallout is one of my most favorite franchises, and there's something so magical about sitting down and getting lost in a Bethesda video game. When Starfield was first announced all the way back in 2018, I was pretty excited about a new Bethesda outing. Apprehensive, but excited nonetheless. While I liked their games, I was aware of the issues that came with them, and by this point, the eccentric, glitchy charm had pretty much worn off, especially after Fallout 76's disastrous launch. This is what tempered my expectations when Starfield was first announced. They weren't the only offenders in releasing shoddy, half-baked, buggy games. A AAA game started to go from a sign of quality to a sign of, hey, this is probably going to suck. I didn't hold my breath when the game was first announced, but as more news came out and that release date inched ever so closer, I started to get a little bit more excited. Over time, more and more news articles came out about Starfield and its features, tickling that part of my heart that holds a special place for Bethesda games. But I stayed true and didn't let myself get too excited. I'd already been burned pretty badly by Cyberpunk 2077, and I wasn't going to let monumental hype get the best of me again. Or so I thought. I maintained this mindset about the game for quite a while, right up until that infamous gameplay leak of August 29th. In that shaky GoPro footage, I saw something that fascinated me. Everything from the gameplay to the animations to even the UI was stellar. To be honest, I was a little shocked that what I was looking at was actually a Bethesda game. Just that single video swayed my opinions in an instant. I fell headfirst right into the hype, even buying the Digital Deluxe upgrade on Game Pass just so I could experience the game as soon as possible. While my opinions on the game had skyrocketed, I did my best to keep them tempered. While Bethesda games are fun, they aren't that fantastic, but I was very confident that Bethesda would finally leave their legacy of broken games behind. I mean, they had Microsoft money behind them at this point. I was sure that they would make a standout title, and I could not have been more wrong. In my initial moments with Starfield, I could feel that familiar Bethesda comfort slowly creeping over me. I was ready to immerse myself in a futuristic world and get lost in an interstellar story. While this may seem trivial, the first thing I noticed while playing the game was the animations. Faces looked fairly realistic, and character movements were fluid and lifelike. It was nothing revolutionary, but it felt like Bethesda was finally taking advantage of current-gen hardware. In earlier Bethesda titles, characters felt extremely stiff and borderline lifeless at times. All of those uncanny NPC videos you see online, that whole joke came from Bethesda games, mainly Skyrim, and how characters talk and act like they're completely disconnected from the world. Granted, some of these games are over a decade old by now, but this is an issue that extends even into Fallout 76. The characters in those games just don't feel lifelike. They feel like dolls or puppets that just populate the world. In Starfield, it's completely different. When I visited cities or outposts, the characters actually felt like genuine, real people. Now, this might be the social outcast in me, but even when I was having conversations with these NPCs, it felt a whole lot more real than it did in earlier Bethesda games. In terms of the world itself, Bethesda absolutely killed it. They did a fantastic job at capturing the scope and scale of an intergalactic world. Starfield is far from being a space sim like No Man's Sky, but that feeling of wonder you feel from being in a world like this is palpable. Just thinking about the number of possibilities available to you is overwhelming in the best way possible. Gameplay feels like it was translated about 1-to-1 from Fallout 4 and Fallout 76. This isn't a complaint by any means. I feel those games have the best gunplay out of all the first-person Fallouts. While it plays pretty similarly, Starfield feels a bit tighter and a little bit more fluid, more in line with other modern shooters than earlier Bethesda games have been. Fallout's action points and Skyrim's stamina systems have been reworked into a new oxygen mechanic to better fit the spacefaring theme. Sprinting, jumping, and melee combat will decrease your oxygen level. Once it depletes, you'll quickly build CO2 that damages your health over time if it reaches a critical point. Thematically, it works well with the sci-fi space theme, but in execution, it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. You don't really drain oxygen in space environments, even when you're in places with no atmosphere like Earth's moon. Seeing how the oxygen is nothing more than a stamina facsimile, it kind of makes sense that it would work this way, but it just takes you out of the game a teensy bit when you're in the deepest reaches of space and don't have to worry about running out of air. Progression and character development is a bit of a mix between Fallout 4 and Skyrim, ditching the specific special system for a broader selection of 5 skill trees that include physical, social, combat, science, and tech.
Hey there, it's your boy Duncan, here to plug this Rush's Twitch stream. If you want to see epic gaming, poopy funnies, and a third thing, then be sure to check out twitch.tv/Dizrish. He's live every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Be sure to watch, or suffer the consequences.
Physical skills improve things like health and oxygen consumption. Social skills improve how well you interact with other characters and companions. Combat skills increase your effectiveness in battle. Science skills improve how effective you are at crafting, surveying planets for resources, and treating your own wounds. And tech skills improve the capabilities of ships and equipment like boost packs. Spaceship piloting is obviously the most novel mechanic Starfield has to offer. What's here is honestly pretty basic, but it all works together really well. Flight and combat has a pretty arcadey feel, which I am thankful for because I am utterly rotten at space dogfights. One feature I really enjoy is how you have the capability to reroute your starship's power. Diverting power to one system will make that system stronger while sacrificing another aspect of your ship's functionality, giving you the ability to adapt your ship's capabilities on the fly. Starfield's main story is one of the weakest parts it has to offer. Honestly, it's something that you should be used to if you're a Bethesda fan. Within the first 10 minutes, you're thrust into the stereotypical Chosen One storyline, with one of the first characters you meet literally giving you his own spaceship and pretty much ordering you to meet up with the other characters that drive the plot forward. I'll be honest, there really isn't much of the game's story I can review. Honestly, there isn't even much of the game that I'm qualified to review, and that certainly isn't from lack of trying, but it's because my save file broke to the point of being unplayable. My first moments with Starfield were incredible. I could quickly feel myself getting immersed into a literal, out-of-this-world experience. It didn't feel like I was just playing a video game, but I was part of a living, breathing world, right up until it all fell apart. Companions in Bethesda games have been shoddy at best. Acting like aliens mimicking human behavior, they walk into your attacks or trigger every trap imaginable, so I usually play without them. But Starfield forces a companion, a robot named Vasco, onto you right from the start. You can order them to stay behind, but I decided to let my robot buddy join me on my quest, hoping that Bethesda had finally learned how to program an AI partner. Companions seem to be mostly invulnerable to enemy attacks, which is lucky because they have no self-preservation instincts whatsoever, taking the brunt of more assault than the pronoun selector in this game's character creation screen.
Fucking pronouns!
The best part of having a companion like this is using them as portable storage. It's really handy, right up until your companion vanishes for no reason whatsoever. Multiple times I had my partner disappear without a trace, taking all of my scavenged items with them, only returning when I entered and exited my spaceship. The shoddy AI doesn't end there. The citizens that populate cities are nothing special in the grand scheme of the game, but they feel much more lifelike than the people of Whiterun or Megaton. About halfway through my playthrough though, these NPCs just dropped their facade altogether. Suddenly cities were crowded with still, lifeless people. Fancy statues that stood motionless in the streets or huddled together in clusters. That is, if the cities weren't completely devoid of life in the first place. And if this wasn't bad enough, I ran into not only one, but 2 back-to-back bugged-out quests. In the first one, I was tasked by a scientist to gather some biosensors placed around the city. 3 of them were easy enough to find, but based on the quest's waypoint, the 4th was in the middle of the ocean. Feeling that something was amiss, I turned to Google to solve my problems, as I do with most things, eventually learning that the 4th one was picked up by some kid who sold it off for money. You need to talk to this kid to find out who he sold it to. Unfortunately for me, this kid wouldn't spawn. I reloaded this area of the city multiple times, left the planet and came back, and even rebooted my game more than once to no avail. The quest was just broken. In the second quest, I was supposed to talk to a bartender in the bar known as Viewport, which is located somewhere in the city of New Atlantis. But to say that that city's layout is confusing would be a massive understatement. And seeing as how modern video games have given me brain rot, I can't navigate any virtual environment without a waypoint. And just like the last quest, this waypoint was smack dab in the middle of the ocean. There must be something really, really important down there. I could have probably found the bar eventually and continued this quest as normal, but I was just so fed up with the last one being broken that I just cut my losses and focused more on the main story. After doing a couple story quests, I amassed a pretty big hoard of junk. I stopped off at a vendor to sell my trash, only to find she wasn't there. Then I went to another vendor, only to find that he was also missing, as well as every other vendor I knew about. Quickly realizing the game was broken yet again, I reloaded my save only to be met with this error. Now this error only shows up when you're loading a modded save file and you don't have those required mods loaded. Now I'm a little forgetful, but when I was playing the game, it hadn't even officially come out yet. So I'm pretty sure I didn't have any mods installed. I've reloaded this save file multiple times since then and still have no vendors showing up. So I basically have a whole facet of the core gameplay experience completely removed from my save file. Not even 10 hours of playtime, and my game was already broken beyond playability. If that doesn't reek of classic Bethesda, then I don't know what does. Again, I was not expecting some fantastic award-winning experience from Starfield, but I was expecting a game that worked. Developers rely too often on day one patches and later updates to fix things that should already be working in their games from the start. That's like going to McDonald's and ordering a burger, and then the burger has buns on it that are covered with mold. And then the cashier is like, oh, don't worry, if you come back in 3 days, we'll give you some fresh buns. That doesn't work. That's why 75% of games now are live service titles pumped full of microtransactions. They'll release a finished game and then slowly drip feed out seasonal content updates that should have just been in the game from the start. Or they'll have microtransactions that already have that content there, but they cost about as much as an actually good indie game. The AAA development scene is perfectly content with consistently releasing half-baked, shoddy experiences because we're perfectly content with buying them. And why are we? All we're doing is feeding into this cycle of having these developers produce nothing but trash. No other industry can get away with this, so why do we let the video games industry do it? I've lost all faith with AAA developers, and I didn't learn my lesson with Cyberpunk, but I certainly have with Starfield. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please do hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you never miss another video, and please let me know what you think of this video and Starfield itself in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.